What's the bottom line? Also on the show, the NASA divorce finalized at last. The custody battle, what to do with the ex and why it may not be over just yet. On the kicker tonight, Back to the Future, Politics 101 from Uganda's NRM. Yvonne's tick may be tired, but the virus isn't. The memo tonight is a golden opportunity to celebrate. Keep your hands off the children, says the punchline. And on the angle tonight, the loose, the fickle, and the shameless of Kenya's party politics.
Ni sheria gani hii ambayo imeanza sasa? Mimi sijakuwa naibu wa rais jana ama juzi. Nimekuwa naibu wa rais kwa miaka 9. Kama hakuja kuwa na nimetembea Uganda, nimetembea Rwanda, nimetembea DRC, nimetembea dunia hii, kwa shughuli ya serikali na shughuli ya kibinafsi. Sijawahi kuulizwa na mtu yeyote eti nahitaji kibali kutoka mahala popote.
Well, it is his word against the regulations. That's all I can say. The regulations require that every civil servant will have a clearance. It cannot be anything else. It must be a missing document. I would want that document, those documents of travel tabled here. And you need to have, if you are a civil servant, a letter of clearance. If he actually had those, all, I'd be surprised that it was stopped.
All right, so that's the back and forth that we've seen this week between the deputy president, his allies on the one hand, and of course government officials there about that trip to Uganda that never was, and quite a few interesting developments. Linus, I'll start with you. This is untidy. I mean, that's the best way of putting it. The deputy president somehow finds himself at the airport. He is going on what he calls a private trip, and somehow he doesn't make it because they say he hasn't got clearance. Then there's back and forth from his people saying, well, he's always traveled. He even said that yesterday in that interview with Inoro FM, that he's never been asked for any kind of clearance and all of that. But bottom line, whatever the truth might be, and that is important, but this really looks bad.
Joe, in November 2017, when we were in the mix of things here about the 2 elections we had, the Minister for International Development in the UK, Priti Patel, was visiting Kenya, and she was recalled by Prime Minister Theresa May. And the issue in contention was her family holiday visit to Israel, during which she met Israeli government officials, an undisclosed meeting with Israeli government officials. What followed was the resignation. She was asked to resign, step down, because of what they called a breach of protocol. Now, protocol is an international custom. It applies to every republic because we all agree to be governed and to conduct ourselves a certain way. And I think what is on trial right now in Kenya is not this whole drama about the DP being stopped from going to Uganda, but more about how state officials conduct themselves, how public officers conduct themselves, and whether indeed there is this line between private and public. The question tonight is, can the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya go for a meeting in Uganda, meet President Yoweri Museveni, launch government projects, and call that private? It's not possible. We have a protocol issue here, and there is one side that is failing even more when it comes to this, and that is the government side, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, OP, the Office of the President. We had that interview, we saw the interview with the permanent secretary, the principal secretary in charge of Interior, and you could see a struggle to explain something very, very simple. What is the secrecy about? When the DP says he has done this for 9 years, what those who are keen on international protocol should know is there has been a 9-year breach of protocol. A person as senior as Deputy President of the Republic cannot travel without informing the government. You can't have a visit that you call private, because if Priti Patel resigned because during a family holiday she met Israeli officials, if indeed the DP was honest in saying that he has done this for 9 years, so we can assume that when we went to launch the construction of the, is it a vaccine factory?
Plant, yeah.
When he went to do that, we assume he did that privately. That is a breach. I think that should be the position.
And Yvonne, I can see you're itching to say something. but add to that the fact that the basic fact that this is the Deputy President of the Republic. And you know, they used to say traditionally that this person is a heartbeat away from the presidency. And even in our context, I mean, under the constitution that we have now, if anything, God forbid, were to happen to the sitting president, then this is a person who would be called to step in. And he might be on a private visit to Uganda.
Absolutely.
Probably
and
nobody knows where
that's right. And here's the thing about somebody as a senior at that level is that you know, the seat of the deputy president and the person that occupies that is actually a national, I don't know if the word would be a national treasure, but is one that must be guarded, you know, like you say, because of the functions that are there. So whether on a private visit or otherwise, the security of the deputy president, the whereabouts of the deputy president, regardless of whether he is on private or public, you know, duties, is something that the taxpayers of the Republic of Kenya are responsible for. So that's number one. And so regardless of whether he's on a private or public visit, there would of course be need for the people that need to know, would want to know where he is at all times. Because we've had serious security breaches of other heads of state or other senior government officials. We've heard of and knock on wood, pray this never happens, assassinations of senior government officials, you know, in other countries. And so therefore it is in the country's best interest to protect individuals at this level, regardless of what they're doing in that country at the time. And I just wanted to also pick up on what, you know, Linus had mentioned about the fact that this has been a breach for 9 years. What would we then say of the Deputy President's trip to Uganda in 2015, where he ostensibly went to campaign for President Museveni? We remember that. He traveled with him on the campaign trail. I don't know, we didn't get a shot of that, but, you know, he's actually on the podium and he's urging the people, you know, vote for this man.
He referred to that
statement.
Yesterday.
And so now we're starting to see how things have been untidy for a while, and it's all now, you know, coming to light. And therefore we have to ask ourselves, so these things have been going on where you have the deputy president of one nation going to campaign for a presidential candidate in another nation, and there's just, I think the admission that this has been happening for 9 years is perhaps not a tidy one. The other thing I wanted to add is, of course, this helped him score political points by sitting at the airport for reportedly, what, 5.5 hours or thereabouts. You know, so it really looks messy that he had to wait out that time, you know, before understanding what was going to happen, whether he would have the trip or not. And for, of course, officials on the other end at the Ministry of Interior who were supposedly trying to figure out whether he had the right clearance during the 5.5 hours. Truth be told, this is messy on both sides, whichever way you look at it.
So when Yvonne has touched on Messi and the fact that, Messi has moved from Barcelona. Anyway, he's touched on it being Messi, in that it's been happening for 9 years. Yeah. But let's look at the relationship between the president and the vice president the first term. I'm sure it would have been easy. The president and the deputy president, yeah, in the first time. I'm sure it was easy for him to tell him, Mr. President, Nasafiri, Ujue, you know, and I'm sure he'll be like, okay, and then that, and all that. And then now, because of the relationship they have now, we don't know if they've spoken recently. Na ameenda tu hivyo. Probably because if he would have tried to go and ask if I can travel, we don't know what the response would have been. I'll look at it in terms of that relationship that they had in the beginning, which has mesabaratika as of now. and kwenda kuomba ruhusa may not really have come up. But
maybe the phone call would not have gone through. I mean, we had people complain before that.
Nigerian phone calls.
Or that their phone calls were not being picked.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I look, okay, also looking at it politically, this reminds me of what happened in September 2017, when the then opposition leader Raila Odinga complained. He released a statement and said that State House is imposing travel restrictions on NASA principals. And at the time, it was Kalonzo Musyoka who wanted to preside over a graduation ceremony at Uganda Technology and Management University as Chancellor. And when he arrived at the airport, authorities at JKA stopped him from traveling, and it was a whole messy matter. But eventually him and Wetangula were allowed to travel. But it was an issue that came up then. And Raila Odinga really complained about how they were being harassed and being denied to travel and all that. And it reminds me of that and the politics of it and the timing of it. Because at the time, Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka were the candidates of NASA who were running against the president. This was after, of course, the first round of elections and all that. And now we have Ruto, who has declared interest in running for the presidency, and the relationship he has now with the executive, and the way things are not working out. So there's a lot of politics also that we read into it, despite all that circular that they're supposed to get permission from the president before they travel, something that had not been implemented before for him when the relations between him and the president were okay.
And Francis, that would suggest, at least if you look at what's going on, that you see in the first term, he basically, and he has said himself, that he was a substantive deputy president. I don't know what he is now, but he says that then he was the substantive deputy president, which means that he was really in charge. He could make things happen in government. And that time, it is possible, like he said, that he just traveled. I mean, left whenever he wanted, and maybe someone would go doing the paperwork once he was out of the country or whatever. But it is also true that at a time like this, when the political stakes are so high, the fallout between him and the president is total, it wouldn't be entirely surprising, I mean, for the government to use this to just make life difficult. I mean, if you have been stealing and you are my friend, and then suddenly we are not, or if you had been abusing people and I'm looking the other way, or you're doing something strange, and when things change, now I will say, hey, by the way, this is against the law. Even though back then, I probably knew it was against the law, but looked the other way. I mean, one would imagine that those are questions that people are asking tonight. What happened? I mean, how is it that the government now realizes that this guy can't travel without clearance, and yet, by his statement, he has been doing this? What changed?
Joe, what changed is obvious. The relationship, number one, between the president and the deputy president. Over a period of time, since 2017, we've been served small doses of the broken relationship between the president and his deputy. What we saw on Monday was probably a bigger slice of that broken relationship. And by broken relationship, I mean, when you look at what happened between 2013 to 2017, things looked rosy, the matching shirts, matching ties. You could see two people who were in sync. But 2017 now to 2021, and looks like it will continue to 2022, you're seeing a complete opposite of what we saw in the first term. The second term, you see a deputy president who is an outsider in government. Yeah, in his own admission, yesterday during that interview with Inoro FM's Nyox Wakata, he even confirmed that his functions were taken away. You remember when the executive order...
Can we listen?
we can listen to that soundbite. Yes,
he's talking about his...
Majukumu yangu yalipewa Matiang'i.
Wakati nilikuwa substantive deputy ya Uhuru Kenyatta 2013 mpaka 2017, Kenya hii ilisonga mbele. Baada ya 2017, unless wewe ni mgeni katika Kenya, mambo niliambiwa nikae kando, kuna wengine watasaidia rais. Tukiongea saa hizi, the big four plan is nowhere. Tukakuja tukaingizwa mambo ya rege na mambo ya kubadilisha katiba na BBI. Alipoamua ya kwamba yale majukumu ambayo nilikuwa ninafanya ipelekwe kwa ofisi ya Matiang'i, ulisikia mimi nikilalamika? Si nilikubali. Nikasema basi hiyo ndio tutafuata namna hiyo. Tunaunga mkono, wacha hiyo kazi iendelee vile. Unfortunately, wale ambao walipatiwa nafasi hiyo either kwa kutojua ama kwa kukosa capacity ama kwa kuzembea, hawakutekeleza wajibu huo. Ndio sababu hiyo mpango kubwa tulikuwa nayo sasa iko katika mahali ambapo hapaeleweki.
Yeah, two things, Joe, from those sound bites. One, when I was the substantive deputy president, that is past tense. Then the second
That's why I was wondering, like,
yeah, the second
what
part,
would that be now?
Yeah, the second part of the soundbite, Alipo, who?
Yeah. Now it's not two.
Yeah, Alipo Chukua, you know, of course that is directly addressing the president, although not mentioning him by name. Goes to show you the extent of, you know, the fracture in the relationship between the president and the deputy president. When the executive order came, restructuring government functions, when we reported that the deputy president's functions had been taken over by the Interior Affairs Cabinet Secretary, particularly the coordination of government functions, where a team was set up, you know, a cabinet committee was set up that would be reporting to Matiang'i, who was made the chairman of that committee. When we reported that the functions had been taken away, a lot of stories were said, oh, the media is trying to create a wedge between the president and the deputy, and it was obvious. So that which was reported then is now manifest today, even by the deputy president's admission. And looks like this is what we are going to have for the next few months, heading to a general election next year. But what is fundamental is the question of that clearance that the deputy president is said should have gotten. That clearance was to come from who? If the officers at the immigration Wilson Airport were telling the deputy president and his handlers that instructions came from above, that above can only be the head of public service or the president. If calls are made to the head of public service and to the Interior Cabinet Minister, then the absolute call should have been made to the president to confirm whether he had actually barred his deputy from getting out of the country and going to Uganda on a private visit. So it's not so much about the clearance, but by who. Yes. And number two, it goes to show, because this is the first pair of a president and a deputy president under the 2010 constitution, goes to show the need for neatness in management of government business, bearing in mind that people may want to draw from lessons of the Uhuru Ruto administration. Going forward, the pair that will be elected next year, if the constitution does not change, there's some lessons they would need to learn from the relationship between the president and the deputy currently, avoid some of the pitfalls moving forward.
I would like us to move this a little bit. Linus, I know you want to say something, but there's something the deputy president said, and I think the president has also alluded to it before, the deputy president trying to make a departure, basically trying to decouple himself from the president and the Jubilee administration, drawing a line between the first term and the second term. He basically said that if there's anything that happened in the first term, you can ask me, I will answer. But if it happened in the second term, then really I am not part of it. And that's startling. I mean, if you think about the fact that as things stand now, he is still the elected deputy president of the Republic of Kenya, constitutionally recognized, so much so that, as I said, if anything were to happen, that there is a vacancy in the office of president, this is the person who would step in, all those statements notwithstanding. And that is quite interesting. I wanted us to listen to that soundbite, then we can come to you, Linus, where the deputy president basically talking about the first term.
The fact that I am elected deputy president means the people of Kenya, if things go wrong in this government, President Uhuru Kenyatta and I will be the ones to be asked. Forget even about MD of, I don't know, some organization, cabinet secretary this and cabinet secretary that. Ultimately, the people that were given the mandate to run the affairs of this government by the people of Kenya is President Uhuru Kenyatta and I.
Tell me for 1 minute, why, after the trust that people of Kenya put on me, why would I sit on national television and say something that's untrue? And to what gain and to what end?
So that was a lot earlier, and I think now there is one which came yesterday where he was talking about if he was asked, he can put his signature on the first term, but not the second term. We can listen to that.
Kama unataka signature yangu kwamba nimekuwa naibu wa rais, I can account for the first 5 years. And it is clear, Wakenya wote wanajua wakati nilifanya kazi na rais kwa karibu na kumsaidia kutekeleza wajibu wake ya kuongoza Kenya na kupanga mambo ya maendeleo, ilionekana wazi. Wakati wengine wameniweka kando na wakachukua nafasi hizo, mambo ndio haya. It is not for me to judge, it is for Kenyans to judge.
Well, Joe, in good times, you saw there, in good times, the Deputy President wanted to be associated with Uhuru Kenyatta and the administration, saying that if anything goes wrong, it's the President and myself. And he took full responsibility there, and he saw the soundbite there. And what we saw next, and that was yesterday, again is what he has been doing the last few days, which is to really try and move as far as possible from this administration. I think yesterday he came close to being more direct than he's been before. He's been very careful not to attack the president, not to mention him, not to really talk about the things that he felt strongly about. But for the first time yesterday, we heard him saying, majukumu yangu yamechukuliwa na Matiang'i.
He even mentioned the person they were given.
He mentioned the person. So this is another step, and he's doing this very, very effectively to his support base, because you saw the meeting today with members of parliament. You saw the messaging in Kiambaa. In Kiambaa, basically, UDA campaigned the way the opposition would against an underperforming government. And DP Ruto is claiming that space quite effectively, increasingly, and for one reason. He is up against an administration that has been breathtakingly poor in communication. You know, this thing of stopping the DP from going to Uganda, it could even be, actually it could be a legitimate act of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in line with protocols. Yeah. What is so difficult about explaining that? Instead of getting the PS Interior, explain it in, you know, it looked a bit like...
They would have held a press conference the very day you released a statement. You know,
yes, hold a press conference and say the DP of Kenya was not able to travel to Uganda today because of this and that. What is this underground sort of operation in which even the interviews look like they are clandestine? Make a statement, whether the PS or the the CS in charge of foreign affairs, and do it. Uganda just showed the way today. Yeah. They came out with a very clear statement on what this issue is all about. But here is what this incident of, was it Tuesday?
Monday.
Monday, what it does to us as Kenyans. It has internationalized this ugly fight and this ugly conduct of government that we are witnessing. Now, William Ruto is not the first deputy president or vice president, if I can use that name, to have difficulties with his boss. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga had difficulties with Jomo Kenyatta, and in 3 years, he had to leave government. Daniel Arap Moi did not have problems with the boss, but had a problem with the equivalent.
The boss's boys.
Yes, his boys, with Harambee House, basically. Harambee House has always run a different show. It's not the first time. And in the 70s, it was particularly strong. And Moi navigated that. Now, Vice President number 3 to have problems was Mwai Kibaki.
Yep.
Mwai Kibaki had issues of principle with his boss. And remember, Moi moved him from vice president to minister for health,
yeah.
Which was a demotion, and he said, no, I'm going to join opposition politics. Vice President number 4 that had problems? George Saitoti.
Yeah.
And Saitoti had it very rough in Kasarani.
There come a time.
Nyamaza professor. You know, shut up professor.
Yeah.
When his position was being basically given away to Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, what is the difference here?
Josephat Karanja.
Oh, Josephat Karanja too. I don't know whether to call it whether he had problems with his boss or he had problems with
himself.
With himself. And basically how he mishandled his base. So it is a very problematic office, no doubt. But when it comes to what William Ruto has faced, the constitution changed. That's the big difference. And William Ruto is today still deputy president because of 2 or 3 reasons. The first one, Uhuru Kenyatta badly needed to be re-elected in 2017. And if we could just listen to Murathe. Do we have that bite of Murathe?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We don't. But remember, just towards the end of the first term, Murathe tellingly said, Uhuru Kenyatta will be a different president in the second term. Why? Because there was so much that had already probably, and I want to speculate here, probably there were things that are already not working between the two of them, and he was looking for a freer space when he's not looking for another term to actually be real in his relationship.
And you know, Linus, President Uhuru Kenyatta speaks about that when he said that he has had more peace, he has done more in the second term, essentially saying without quote unquote the baggage of this relationship.
Sure.
And I think we can listen to that.
Yeah.
Much more than I was able to do even in my first term. Why? Because I have been able to focus myself, working in conjunction with my colleagues, and being able to focus on the development agenda, not the political agenda.
That is pretty interesting. I mean, considering that on the one hand, you have the deputy president saying that things were really great in the first term and they have gone totally south in the second term, and the president on the other hand saying, you know what?
He has more peace in the second term.
I have more peace, I have done more in my second term. Essentially, the deputy president saying without him, things have gone wrong, but the president saying, no, actually, without the deputy president, I'm actually having a better time here.
Actually, twice, I think we've come close to knowing what exactly went wrong between the president and his deputy. We have come close to knowing what could be the original sin. And I want us to just listen to another bite. When President Kenyatta first came up with the term TangaTanga.
Hii kijana anaitwa Ruto, unajua kila weekend anatangatanga kila pahali. Atakuwa anapitia hizi machorochoro. Akiona kuna kitu inaenda kona mumwambie. Si namna hiyo? Si namna hiyo?
This was not complimentary. Not at all. You needed to have understood what the president meant by that. There was obviously behind that statement some irritation. Where is the irritation coming from? The fact that for much of this term as deputy president, William Ruto has made no secret about his ambitions to succeed President Kenyatta as president. Now, ambition is the biggest sin a vice president can commit when one is serving. And even more, when you are the deputy to a sitting president and you are criticizing that regime. You know, there was, when George Bush was campaigning to succeed his boss, Ronald Reagan, and in one of the rallies he said, I promise you a kinder government. First Lady Nancy Reagan waited for him and asked him, okay, kinder than who? Because of course it was a jibe at his boss. So it's very, very difficult to have political ambitions to be president and be vice president at the same time. It requires a lot of restraint of the kind DP has not been able to display.
And I think we need to listen to a second soundbite. I don't know if we have the Bomas one. When the president was talking about passing the baton. Do we have? Let's listen to that soundbite and we'll continue.
Hii ni ile ya kuhandover, unajua? Si ndio? Inaitwa relay. Unakimbia ule mwingine anakugojea pale, anatakikana kukugojea ndio ashike aendelee, si ndio? Lakini sasa my brother William hapa amepinduka, anakimbia nyuma.
And I think this was the second instance where the president actually almost spoke out clearly about his issues with the deputy president. And
very
that
powerful
ambition,
symbolism, though.
Symbolism, that ambition that Linus was just talking about, and that's probably the point of contention between the two of them. And it's interesting how you said the deputy president says that things went so well in the first term, but the president, in his opinion, things are going better now because of probably the handshake and his relationship with ODM leader Raila Odinga, and the fact that now he says he's able to do his work better and it's more peaceful. Yes, we've seen that when he travels to Nyanza and the reception he receives there compared to how it was in 2017, that in some areas of that region, the repeat presidential polls could not even be held because of the hostilities that he had witnessed. But Linus brought up a few points about how the deputy president is distancing himself from this current government because of what is seen by, I think a recent poll showed about 70% of Kenyans say that the government is not going in the right direction in terms of economically and things like that. And for him, he feels he needs to distance himself with this current government and say whatever is happening, we may see more. But then we look at the office of the deputy president as is now. Linus spoke a bit about that office and what it has represented in the past. What the 2010 constitution did, I think it partly designed maybe to address some of the what we call inadequacies with that office in terms of, one, the vice president could be hired and fired by, at will by the president. There are instances of one being fired by the roadside. The vice president was supposed to have been a member of parliament. The vice president could have a ministerial position. So he had all that in the previous office. And then now comes this new one where he's a member of the cabinet, he sits in the National Security Council, he chairs the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council, IBEC. Even issues to do with the remuneration and the salaries of the deputy president is protected by the constitution. The fact that for him, his main duty, of course, is to deputize the president, and in case there's any vacancy, he can take over, and he's deemed to have served a full term, if it's 2.5 years to the end of the term. And there are also instances when he can take over temporarily, like we saw when the president left for The Hague during the cases. So there are all these responsibilities that the deputy president has in the new constitution, but most of it is to deputize. Ufanye ile kitu rais amesema. Principal assistant. But then now, with the relationship that they have, I highly doubt that we would have an instance where rais atasema nishike kidogo na safiri narudi. So it is important to look at that context in terms of what the constitution says about the office of the deputy president vis-a-vis now what we are seeing as a relationship between the president and the deputy president in the current situation.
Yvonne, you've been quiet for a while. It doesn't help. It doesn't help this conversation that the deputy president was almost the face of government in the first term. I mean, all the promises that they made, even during the campaigns and everything, he was kind of the face of the promises about stadiums, about laptops, and all of these things. And so to come to this point where, on the one hand, you see the president who feels relieved that, you know, now he does not have the deputy president or whatever that represents, like an albatross on his neck. But on the other, you also have a deputy president who is running as far as his mouth can take him away from the record of the current government.
And that was actually manifest in the interview that the deputy president had on Inoro FM. I think we've all said it's the first time that the deputy president has openly criticized a very specific project. Before, we've heard him talk about a derailment of the Big Four agenda since the handshake, which was rather general. But then when he then went and very directly criticized the small arms factory that was launched just a couple of months ago, then you start to see what the deputy president has to do now that we've got about a year to the election. So because he was such a public face, like you said, Joe, of the Jubilee agenda, he now has to decouple himself, completely delink himself from all of the ills, shall we say, or failures of this administration and move as far away from them as possible. But in so doing, then he has to now directly confront the president, who is still his boss, and in so doing incurring the wrath of the president and probably the government and all of those that work there. And so this is where he will now find himself in that very tricky position, that he now has to walk back quite a few of the statements and very directly pinpoint and say, like he did with this one, he said, but this one should have been this amount of money should have been in a more labor intensive investment as opposed to what it is now. This will not provide as many jobs as we would need to sort of sort out the issue of employment. And we're going to start to see a lot more of that over the next year. The other thing I just wanted to add, because I know we're going into a break, that stood out for me in the last week with the deputy president, and that was that trip to Uganda, is that the deputy president is now looking ahead towards 2022. And for any presidential hopeful or aspirant, one of the two things you need is a war chest and international allies. And when you take a look at what's happening between him and President Museveni, they have enjoyed relations for quite some time now. Immediately they got into power. Museveni then joined the anti-ICC rhetoric in 2013 and beyond. Like we've said, Ruto went and campaigned for Museveni in 2015. In fact, he's traveled 7 times in 6 years to this country, a clear sign that he's now looking beyond his boss and starting to create international allies. In fact, Ruto has spoken very favorably of the East African Federation. That is something that President Museveni is pushing for. When he was there, he said, we're looking to you to start to create this. And so starting to say some of the things that, Museveni would like. And this is nothing new with the deputy president. Raila himself has enjoyed, some international relationships. He's known to be good friends with Obasanjo,
but not with the former president,
but not with Museveni. And he's known to be good friends with Magufuli and not with Museveni. In fact, if you remember, when Obasanjo attended the late Jaramogi's burial, remember what happened at the time? Sort of similar to what we're seeing now. President Sani Abacha actually ordered the arrest of President Obasanjo, for his time here in the country at that moment. And so, we're seeing a lot of this travel to foreign countries. Didn't we see Raila Odinga as well traveling to Dubai, where he met the Nigerian Atiku Abubakar, I believe. And so, this is something that we're going to see him doing a lot more of in terms of getting more allies across the border. And remember, President Museveni has been in power for 35 years. We've had 3 presidents since, and him being Uganda being a very close trading partner, in fact the top trading partner with Kenya, would want to sort of seek his support, in line with that. Others, Raila with Obasanjo, with Cyril Ramaphosa, the billionaire president from South Africa, with Magufuli, whom is now lost following his passing. So there's quite a bit of this, and I think it's also a sign of him already starting to think about the 2022 presidential election and working towards that with regional allies.
We need a break. Francis will be speaking after the break, because I will need you to make a substantive statement. So let's take that break. We'll be back.